Good afternoon and a warm welcome to today's webinar, Plagued by Worry and Negative Thinking, How to Deal with Your Inner Critics and Find Your Inner Champions. So this is the 8th in the series of This Can Happen webinars, which are aiming to support you and your colleagues and families with a series of webinars at this extraordinary time. So before we start, I'm just going to quickly run through how this webinar might work for those who might not have participated before. So our speaker, Tracy, will talk to you for about 55 minutes and you'll be able to follow along on your screen, and then we'll move on to questions at the end. She might also ask you a few questions throughout, but I'll come on to that. So we will be sending you the slides and a recording of the session afterwards via email. So please don't worry if you miss anything today. We all have more distractions at home than we might normally have. So you can ask a question at any time during the session. As I said, all you need to do is type it into the question box, which you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. So the questions are totally anonymous and they only come to my screen. So please do feel free to contribute in complete confidence. As I say, Tracy might ask you for a few reactions or thoughts that you might have, which I can read out as well. Okay, so that is enough from me. It now gives me great pleasure to hand over to your guest speaker today, Tracy.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. It's lovely to know that you're all out there. I've got like a little counter in the corner of my computer saying how many people have attended. I'm sorry I can't see all your faces, but hopefully you can see my face and the slides. So here we are. Today we're going to spend, yes, an hour looking at our inner critics, understanding them and learning how to deal with them. So just a little bit about me first. Oh, do I need to say thank you to all our lovely sponsors there, Suzy, or no?
No, don't worry. That's just the slide. Don't worry.
All right. So just a little introduction to me. I have a portfolio career, which basically means that I do lots of different things that make up my working week. And they are really all centered around the nucleus of 3 things: enlightening, empowering and enhancing people's lives. That's what really sparks joy in me and gives me great purpose. So a little bit of background: I am a professionally certified exec and leadership coach. I have had something like 27 years experience in the media industry in production and commissioning. So I still have 1 foot or 2 in the media industry. I work for Channel 4 as a creative mentor of their indie growth fund. So I work with independent production companies, helping them with their growth strategy. I run the Women in Film and Television Mentoring Scheme, which is a sort of 6-month boot camp for mid-career women, really to help them enhance their careers, empower them, give them the tools to get further and further in their careers. I also am a professionally qualified yoga teacher, and I created a workshop, a well-being workshop called Yoga in the Boardroom, which is really about how to use hack yoga techniques to be able to increase your physical and mental well-being in the workplace. So it's really about instead of having to have a mat and lycra leggings, it's really about how to use your desk and chair and intention and breath work to feel powerful and calm at work. And finally, putting all those 3 things together, I also write. So I'm a well-being columnist for a magazine called TBI. So today, that's enough about me. Let's move on to today's session. So what is an inner critic? It would be great if people could write in the little chat box what they think an inner critic is and what their inner critic might say to them. So an inner critic is basically that voice in your head where you're trying something or you've done something and things may or may have not gone to plan, and it is that voice in your head that says anything like, oh, that was a really stupid thing to do, or why did you think you could ever do it, or what on earth makes you think somebody would want that, or you. So it's this kind of negative self-talk that goes on in everybody's mind. It kind of is a voice that brings us down. It's a voice that really is just not very pleasant. It creates self-doubt. So it's human nature to have inner critic, an inner critic, or you might, like this guy, have like four or five inner critics in there, all coming out at different points of time. So let's go to the next slide. Suzy, I don't know whether
do you want me to read some of these out, Tracy? So they've just quite a few come in.
Move to the next slide, if you would, please, Suzy.
Oh, sorry, there you go. There you go. Sorry.
Anybody got any inner critics that they want to sort of tell us about now? Off you go, Suzy.
So we've got my inner voice, the little voice in your head that criticizes what you're doing.
Yes.
Negative self-talk, you're not good enough, they'll laugh at me, etc.
Yes.
Self-criticizing self-analysis.
Yes.
The little voice that won't be quiet and is always negative.
Yes.
Tells me to worry and struggles to let go when I've done something wrong. Or devil on the shoulder saying I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Yes, the voice in my head which says I can't do something, I'm not doing things right, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So we've all got them.
Imposter syndrome. Yeah.
We've got them, and they are horrible. And the one of the things I want to explain is what they're there for. So if we go to the next slide, and everybody can see this cartoon. Sometimes an inner critic actually has behind it is a sort of well-meaning intent. So here we've got a dad and his son looking out at the big wide world saying, son, there's a world out there ripe for the taking. You better stay home with me. So in one sense, if you think about your inner critics, often they are trying to keep you small and risk-free. They're trying to stop you from trying anything new with the threat that it's going to fail, or that you're going to look stupid, or that something terrible is going to happen. You're just not good enough, or you're not smart enough. And so one way of looking at an inner critic is that they are trying, like an overprotective helicopter parent, to keep you from any harm. So, you know, my mother is in her 80s now, and I'm a grown woman of 50 and independent with my family of my own, you know, career, etc. She will worry if I travel anywhere, not that that's going to happen for a long time, but if I go on a plane to a different country for a work trip, she will be up all night, unable to sleep, no matter how long that flight is, until I get to the other end. So at the age of 80, she is still worrying about me and wanting to keep me from harm. So in one sense, just have a think about your inner critics and think, is there any kind of well-meaning in there, but sort of misguided in that they just want to keep you safe? So for example, is there like, oh, you know, you're not good enough to try for that promotion. Don't risk it. Don't speak out. Meaning, oh, you know, you might make a fool of yourself, you know, and actually, I don't want you to make a fool of yourself, because then you're just going to be really upset and I'm going to have to console you somehow, or you're going to make yourself really unhappy. And I don't want that to happen. So sort of like, it's that kind of thing, like really some of those inner critics would rather you were wrapped up in cotton wool in the safety of your own home, never trying anything, never doing anything in case you upset yourself or come to some sort of harm. Okay, so have a little think about that. Or any of your inner critics, could that be the cause? There is this sort of self-preservation thing, or preserving you. Obviously, the issue with that is that if you listen to all of those kind of well-meaning inner critics about keeping you safe and small, you would never do anything in your life. You would never risk anything. You would never try anything. You would never reach for that promotion or reach for that new business venture or try something new. And things would just stay basically small and safe and probably very, very unfulfilled. So my tip is, if this is resonating with any of you, just go to the next slide, please, Suzy. Try sort of separating those inner critics and listen to them with a bit of patience, as if they were like almost like an elderly aunt that said, oh, no, 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 you know, that's not a real job, whatever you're doing, you know, you want to be thinking about your pension, you want to be thinking about this and that, you don't want to be going off traveling the world. So try and think about them as an elderly aunt who really, really cares about you, but really just wants to keep you safe at home. So no harm comes to you, you never get upset, and there's never any ugly feelings. So try and show that inner critic a bit of compassion by listening to what they're saying and trying to understand what the fear is underlying what they're saying to you. So if they're saying things like, oh my God, will you be too stupid to do that? Or you're not qualified enough, or, you know, I don't know who you think you are. It's like, okay, Aunt Ethel, you know, I understand that's a bit harsh, but, you know, I understand what's probably underlying those ideas is that you don't want me to go for something and then be disappointed if I don't get it. But I appreciate that view. I appreciate you caring about me so much that you want me to stay safe. But if I don't try, I'm never going to find out. And if I never try for bigger and better things, then I'm going to stay the same the whole time. So I'm going to be firm with you and just say, thanks for your advice, but actually I need you to pipe down now, and I'm going to get on with it. So that's just one technique. Does anybody, Suzy, just ask a question out there, does that resonate with people? And we're going to get onto the nasty inner critic soon, but does anybody kind of with that kind of thinking think, yes, I do have probably a well-meaning inner critic?
Yeah, I'll just wait and see if because it takes a couple of seconds for people to. Oh yes, look, we're getting lots of yeses. There you go.
Yeah. So if like me, you've got real warriors in your family, kind of put those, and you know what that's like, you know what I'm talking about, people, and you might even do it to your own family, right? Just think, okay, actually, warriors, thank you for loving me so much that you want me to keep me safe, but I've got to go out, I've got to kind of like try for things, I've got to follow my dreams. So that's one thing. All right, the second one, let's move on to the next slide.
Someone said here, I can see that, but I'm not sure. I think mine has the best intentions. There you go.
Okay, we're going to come on to those. We're going to come on to those now, the next slide. So we've dealt with the kind of like fairly benign ones, but then there are these really horrible, nasty ones. And, you know, sometimes they're so sort of insidious that you don't even know that they're there. There's just like this pit of despair or self-loathing or self-disgust, or, you know, it might be like, oh, I mean, this is a bit silly really, but for me, you know, those Lindor chocolate balls, I can't eat one, I literally have to eat 8. And every time I do, I'm like, what? Why have I done that? Why can I not be doing with one? And then that voice will come in saying, well, you're just really greedy and you've got no self-control. That's actually not that nasty. But there might be ones that are saying, you know, the really nasty ones are saying, you're worthless, or you're never going to make it, or that new venture, it's never going to work, so you might as well just not bother. So is anybody willing to share any of their nasty ones, the ones that are like these sort of demons that really kind of grab you and whisper nasty things in your ear?
Okay, so I've got it's know your limitations, you can't do that, you're so stupid, hate the word stupid.
Yes.
Mine say I'm repulsive.
Oh, yeah.
My nasty critic tells me I'm a bad parent. Nasty ones, I'm a failure, I can't do my job, I'm not good enough, self-doubt, unable to realize positive, or nearly there. Yeah, lots of I'm not good enough, no one will like you.
Yes, horrible. They are absolutely horrible, demon, demotivating, really sort of keeping us down. So my tip here is what I'm going to suggest you do is, if you go to my next slide, is I want you to write down all the different inner critics that you've got in your head, separate them out as if they were people. So here I've kind of just got a identity parade with various sort of random people. But I think what's useful is to really separate those inner critics from you yourself. If you think that there's you, your sort of true self, and then imagine that you've got these inner critics that are attacking you at different times, but just imagine separate each of those inner critics out with a particular line that they say. So there might be one saying, you know, you're stupid. There might be another one saying you're repulsive. The other might be the one that's the parenting one, that you're a terrible parent. This is not a very nice bunch of people. But once you've sort of separated them out, give them a name. Give them a name like, I don't know, Tony or something, or whatever, and picture them as a person. So for example, mine, when I was leaving, you know, I worked for many years in as my main job in television, and my last role was as a divisional director at the BBC, and I was leaving that role to start my build up my portfolio, and I used to have an inner critic who was effectively me, but literally she would wear a grey misshapen tracksuit, like old one, you know, very unflattering. She would sit on the sofa with a cup of tea and a big stack of biscuits, and she would have unwashed hair and, you know, just be a bit sort of slovenly and grey. Everything was grey about her. And she would sort of look at me and sort of say, well, I mean, I don't know why you're doing that, you know, thinking that you're going to do a portfolio career, because you're never, ever going to earn enough money from it. So I don't know why you bother. So that's just an example. So that's one of mine. But what I want you to do, and you don't have to do it all in this session, is just to identify your inner critics as if they were a lineup in a parade. So picture them as a personality. You know, what is their fully rounded personality? What is the kind of voice that they use? You know, are they really, you know, I once worked with a client who was in a very competitive industry, and her inner critic was somebody who was much posher than her, was kind of like a snobby, entitled man who just sort of sneered at her, and whatever she said that she was doing, it was never going to be good enough for him, because he always had done something bigger and better. So it's like, give them a personality, and what are they like? So for example, what kind of thing do they like to eat or drink? What do they wear? What do they sound like? And also sort of give them a bit of a character, like what kind of thing is their backstory? You know, have they been affected by anything in their life? Have they got a have they always had privilege, or what is their story? And then last of all, I just want you to kind of observe when they actually show up. So Suzy, just a question for everybody on the webinar. Has anybody can anybody give us a description of one of their inner critics, kind of following that little tip, that procedure?
Just wait a second. Someone's just written a nice comment here, though. True to form, my 3-year-old is demanding my attention as I'm trying to listen to this. Quite funny. And they're going to come back later and listen to the recording.
Come back later. Yeah. Anybody? What about you?
Just waiting. There's a few more sort of like, you know, dark, nasty critics, but nothing. Oh, hold on. Evil eye. I can see all your faults.
Oh, yeah. Evil eye. Yeah. And if you were put the evil eye in a person, then I think it really helps if you identify what they're actually saying. So just give them sort of that kind of personality, so you can really picture them, so that when they actually pop into your head, you're like, okay, here's so and so, here's Tony the Toff, or whatever it is.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry, they're just coming in. Bad parent critic. Mine is one of those amazing earth mothers who thinks everything I do is wrong. That made me laugh. Mine has always got folded arms and is very critical of everything I do. Oh, here's a good one. Barbie looking girl who is always perfect and looks down on me and says to me, oh, that's cute.
Okay, brilliant. Oh, I love it. Can you imagine if we had all of our inner critics lined up in a big parade? It would be quite a cast of characters. Okay,
Oh, no,
and then
this is good as well. Sorry, last one. I can see my inner critic as an older woman who's never left the village she grew up in and sees no reason to take any risks. There you go.
yeah. Excellent. And also they don't always have to look like nasty demons. For example, you know, you could very well have like a very sweet little Miss Perfect in there. You know, little Miss Perfect is often one of the harshest inner critics because nothing's ever good enough. And if you go to the next slide, what I want to show you is normally an inner critic represents a value that you hold dear. So, but it's just gone a bit wrong, as in it's just overplayed. So, for example, the lady who had either Barbie or the Earth Mother. Let's take the Earth Mother. You know, I would suspect that that person who had that inner critic, you know, one of their biggest values is being a good mother and giving their family like a perfect upbringing and life and wholesome food and all of that kind of thing. But that person is probably a working person and unable to spend the time that you would be able to if you were if you were an Earth Mother without any worries in the world. So it's often an inner critic is often something that is focusing on a value that you hold dear that you feel you are not having enough time to do or not doing well in, so or not quite enough of. So if you think about the Barbie doll one, I don't know what that could be, whether that's related to health and exercise and I don't know whether it's Barbie, whether it's conforming to a particular shape. So it's like at the other end of the spectrum of the inner critic is normally some sort of value that you hold dear. So for me, my kind of grey tracksuit, never going to earn any money out of your portfolio career is really because one of my greatest values is, and particularly apt in this time, is the financial security to bring my children up and keep a roof over our head. Now that's probably a fairly common one, worrying about money, especially in this time. And I think there are lots of similar inner critics that we have. But normally, if you think about what is that in each of those inner critics point or worry, is it that that actually worried about my health underneath it? Or is it that, I'm really wishing underneath that I had a bit more time to do a particular part of my life? What is that inner critic representing? And it will be overplayed. So if you go to the next slide here, this is the perfectionist sale. So, a lot of people have a perfectionist inner critic because, and you can see here that it's almost not enough to be excellent, because your perfectionist inner critic is holding the bar up so high that anything short of perfect is not enough. So to most other people, like being 100%, getting to 100% and being excellent is, the rest of the world is absolutely fine. But your inner critic, if you've got a perfectionist inner critic, just overplays it, goes too far. So here, that somebody who has a perfectionist inner critic probably really, has values of delivering and delivering excellence and doing a job really, really well. And if you're the type of person who you deliver something and it's gone well and 9 people say positive things to you and give you praise and pats on the back, but then one person has some sort of mild bit of constructive criticism, if you're the type of person who immediately discards all those positive things that people have said and then focuses on that one negative point, you'll know what I mean. It's sort of like that. That's what happens here, is that instead of looking at all the positive, you're focusing on the one negative thing. So inner critics tend to belie something at the other end of the scale that you hold dear, whether it is looking after yourself in terms of health, whether it is getting more variety, I don't know, into your life, whether it's financial security, whether it's loneliness, whether it's wanting to be part of a family, etc., or find love or whatever. They're normally at the other end of the spectrum, and it's just overplayed. So to have a think about if you really think back to what that might be causing it, it can illuminate a lot. Does that make sense for people out there? Does anybody have an idea about what one of their more serious inner critics may well be, what value it may be attached to at the other end?
Just waiting to see. We're still, if people are gonna. Still got a lot of inner critics coming out, but not, oh, hold on, absolutely. The perfectionist is so true of me. He says, yes, sounds spot on. Barbie is probably taking care of herself and confident. This is absolutely me, a perfectionist.
Yes.
Being judged. Yes, absolutely. I have a perfectionist one. What's someone here? Fitness value. Inner critic is elite. So if I'm not there, I'm not good enough.
Yeah. And like me and my Lindor chocolate balls, I'm sure I'm not alone there. But that kind of, and I know that's quite a light-hearted one, but I think it's because like I obsess about, I shouldn't be eating chocolate, I've got no self-control, etc., etc. And my inner critic, well, you've got no willpower and this, that, and the other. And I think, at the other end of that is because one of my huge values is health and nutrition. And I just think, I know that those Lindor balls in that amount of quantity are not healthy or nutritious. But, I just think that, on the balance of things, I eat healthily. And it's also sort of, I think, into conforming into what people should look like. So I think, well, if I eat all those Lindor balls, I'm going to put more weight on, and then, I won't be attractive or whatever it is, or I won't be able to fit into my skinny jeans, etc. But, at the end of the day, I kind of think I've overcome that one, because I just think, well, so be it. I'm just going to wear bigger jeans and I'm going to enjoy my chocolate. And because that's one of the things that makes my life fun, chocolate. So I love chocolate. So I've kind of got rid of that inner critic now, and that comes with acceptance. But it's really about the underlying thing there was that, one, I was being greedy, which would mean that I would be fat. And now I just think, well, so be it. I love chocolate more than I worry about putting on weight. Anyway, I slightly digress. So what are we going to do with these inner critics? I want to bring in the concept of the inner champion. Okay, so before we move, okay, here we go. So what I want you to start thinking about as I talk you through this slide is who, and it doesn't matter how ridiculous or personal, or it doesn't matter if it's a celebrity or not, who in the world do you admire? I've got two here that are my sort of I've adopted as my inner champions. And you don't have to think too much about it, because I'm going to talk you through it. So people that you really, really admire, it doesn't matter if they've got anything to do with your lives whatsoever. So for me, on the left hand of the slide is Grace Jones, who is pictured here at a fashion show for Tommy Hilfiger, designed by a pop star called Zendaya. Now, in this picture, Grace Jones is 70 years old. And if you Google it after this, because I couldn't show you tapes, she struts down that runway in a little leotard, strong, fit, healthy, sassy, arms out wide, just shimmying down there. And that is somebody that I just look at and think, wow, she's 70, she's strong, she's always been bold, she's had, cut a very original path. She hasn't really cared what other people think so much. She's gone against the grain. So it's just start thinking about the people that you admire and what their qualities are. On the other hand, we have here, that this is Muhammad Ali. He's the one that's actually leaning back. And I've always been greatly inspired by Muhammad Ali. Not that I love boxing or that I know the first thing about boxing, let's face it. It's a brutal sport, in my opinion. I don't really get it. But what I love about Muhammad Ali is when I was growing up, I would see him on the television, and he was this hugely charismatic, fun character who was super cheeky, like would say, he would talk about, that float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. He had a real way with words. He was like a poet. He was a huge entertainer. But on top of that, he was incredibly skilled. He put a lot of work into his talent. He was excellent at what he did. But more than that, what I liked about him is that he stood up for things that he thought were right, even though it went against the grain. So, for example, he disposed of his given name, Cassius Clay, and took on an Islamic name, Muhammad Ali. He cast off his name because he said that was his slave name. He became a Muslim in a very Christian country, which, gosh, if you imagine what it's like now, what it must have been like when he did it in the 60s, must have been really eyebrow raising. He refused to be drafted into the Vietnam War. And can you imagine, for a patriotic country like the United States, how difficult that must have been? I think he got stripped of all his championships. It cost him 3 years of his career. So what I like about him is not just the sort of the charisma and the showmanship and the humor and the sort of poetry, but also that he really had integrity and courage, as I see it, determination. So what that means is that what I find is that the people that you really, really admire in life, historical figures, or it even goes in terms of like books, characters in books, or characters in movies that you like, they often exhibit the values that are very, very dear to you. So, that the ones that really are important to you, and that you would really sort of look up to and want to be like. So if I could just ask a couple of you when I say to you, who's the person that you really think of, that you look up to and admire, what are the kind of names that you would come up with?
Okay, so we've got Nelson Mandela, unsurprisingly more than once, quite a few Nelson Mandelas. Yeah. Florence Nightingale.
Yes.
My best friend. Oh, that's nice.
Yes.
Nelson Mandela. Oh, David Beckham. The Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama, yeah. Yeah.
Lady Gaga, determined, focused, overcoming negativity, versatility. Yeah. Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
Rosa Parks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jacinda Ardern. The Queen. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got the Queen, Elton John. I'm assuming that's two different people, the Queen and Elton John. Oh, Agatha Christie. Michelle Obama.
Okay. Now, this is wonderful, because you can already imagine, just start typing in terms of the person that you've chosen, if you haven't already, what are the values do you think that they stand for? What are they? I'm going to speak a little bit, but a lot of those people were very strong, courageous, tenacious. Florence Nightingale devoted her life to helping other people. So whose ever choice that was, then I suspect it's somebody who values helping other people. Altruism is something that is really, really important to that person, and something that without having some outlet for altruism, that person would probably not live a very purposeful life. But the Margaret Thatcher, The lady's not for turning, so very determined. Nelson Mandela, so sort of principled and stood up for his rights and the rights for other people. So any sort of values come through yet, Suzy?
So I've got a lot of Michelle Obama as well, actually.
Yeah.
That's I can't see who they're referring to. Self-belief for one so young. It's difficult because some people just write, positive, confident, resilient about saying, oh, that's Michelle Obama. I think she was a believer in others, excelled her own childhood, and a lover of humanity, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes. Yeah.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge, good one, like that.
Yeah. Fabulous. Okay, brilliant. So I now want you to have you don't have to do this all now in the same way that you don't have to identify and name and give a look to all your inner critics. But I want you to start thinking about 2 to 3 inner champions that you can carry with you in your head. So for example, mine are people like Grace Jones and Muhammad Ali. So if we go to the next slide, I might have overdone, I might have leapt forward a bit. Oh yeah, go back. Yeah, so just this is the sort of the guide to how to do it. So it's identify your potential inner champions. And these are the sort of questions I want you to kind of really think about. Who do you admire? Why? What values are they exhibiting? And then the next bit is really, how are they showing up in your life? And you might need to sit down with a friend or a colleague or somebody who isn't you to talk this through, because the other day I was speaking to somebody who runs a sort of organization helping other people and talking about difficult subjects. And I said, who would your inner champion be? And he said, Beyonce. And I said, why? And so he came up with a list of qualities. And then I said, well, all of those qualities are what you are exhibiting. You've done this, 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 and this. And that's the point about your inner critics, is your inner champions, is that they have the values that you personally hold dear. And even though you think they might not be, you might think, oh my God, Lady Gaga's here, or Nelson Mandela is up here. How could I even be worthy? But the thing is that you are going to share a lot of values with Nelson Mandela, and you will already, without you even realizing it, be living those values, because they will naturally just have shown up because they're important to you. But if you kind of sit down with a friend and say, these are the 4 qualities, that I admire in Nelson Mandela or Michelle Obama, how do you think, if you need that help, how do you think that these show up in my life? How am I exhibiting these values? And then the second question, and I think you'll be surprised, and pleasantly surprised to know that actually, you've already got experiences and anecdotes, etc., where probably lots of other people can see that you're like that, but you haven't really realized it yourself because you've been drowned out by those inner critics, right? So the next one is like, how could they show up more? If you had those inner champions in your head all the time, at each difficult time when an inner critic popped into your head and they were there to stick up for you and defend you and speak for you, how would those values, how could those values show up more? So for example, if you like Michelle Obama, or so there's so many people there, for like Lady Gaga for expression, speaking their truth and all that kind of thing, where is it possible in your life to live that value more? So instead of sitting back and being too frightened to voice your opinion, is there a way that you could use those champions to really speak your truth, or do whatever it is that inspires you? So yeah, so the next 2 questions are really the practical use of inner champions. Is if they were in your head and your inner champions loved you and they admired you, because they will, because you share the same values, you're both on the same side, what would they say to you? What would they say to you to encourage you? what would they say to you if you were feeling down? What would they say to you if you needed motivation? What would they say to you if you were down in the dumps and feeling sorry for yourself? So when I think of that, like if I go back to my portfolio career, which I, left a big job at the BBC and then started from scratch with no guarantee of anything, if I imagine what, Grace Jones probably would have been quite nonchalant about it and just, said, follow your art, follow your passion, don't worry about the rest. And, Muhammad Ali would have been like, get up, do the work, put the practice in, sell yourself, So it's like, what would your inner champion say to you to encourage yourself to live your life according to those values? Imagine them that they are always by your side. And then the next point, which is really, really powerful. So hang on, just that last point is imagine them giving you a pep talk whenever you need it, a pep talk about, well, let's go on to it actually. And the fun bit is if you imagine a meeting of your inner critic and your inner champion, what would that conversation be? So if your inner critic says, I don't know, you're lazy, you're stupid, you're repulsive, etc., etc., and you've got your inner champion over here on the other side, what would your inner champion say to them on your behalf? They would knock them down pretty quickly, or they would come up. Nelson Mandela would probably come up with something incredibly wise and compassionate and see straight through that inner critic, and that inner critic would probably be, kissing his hand by the end of it, wouldn't he? Lady Gaga, again, would probably have a lot of compassion, but a lot of kind of like, you are beautiful, no matter whatever, etc. She would be really, really championing you. Margaret Thatcher, she might have she would see that inner critic off with a bit of a stern telling off and a really clever argument, I'm sure. So just picture that. Picture your bring in and really use your inner champion. And the next slide, let's go to the next slide. If you imagine, here we go, create your crew of inner champions and call upon them. So if you think here in your head, I don't know how you like to think of it, if you like to think of it as your own personal boardroom or your own personal entourage or your own personal sort of friend group or whatever, stock those with 2 to 3, however many you like, inner champions to help yourself against those inner critics. And it might be that you might have one, like 2 of mine, Grace Jones and Muhammad Ali, are quite dynamic, but often I think, I'm told by my husband that I pack too much stuff in and I never sit down and I never relax. And I think that's probably true. So one of mine used to be like a really, really chilled out surfer dude, with the long bleached hair, the surfboard, didn't want to do anything other than be with nature, surfing all day. And so sometimes I think when I'm really busy and I'm sort of like getting a bit overwhelmed or just a bit too wired up, I'll think about that and think, okay, what would he say to me? And it would probably be just relax, lie down for a bit, stretch out and do nothing. So your crew of inner champions don't all have to be the strident, forceful people. They can be a mix of people in there. And whenever you have those inner critics, just call upon, it's either 2 things, isn't it? It's either think of them, show them compassion as if they were a well-meaning but misguided elderly aunt or family member. And the second thing is that they're the nasty ones, is just employ Nelson Mandela or whoever. Beyonce is often a great inner champion for some people, to see them off. What would they say on your behalf? Okay, so the last slide, I just want to, before we open up to questions and stuff, I just want to show you this last slide. So this is a quote from Muhammad Ali. So I think this is before he ever really won all those world championships. I am the greatest. If you've seen clips of him, he just basically says, I'm the prettiest, I'm the greatest, I'm this, that, and the other. I said that even before I knew I was. So I think that's such a fantastic thing, is actually to listen to your inner champion. And I don't know who his was, but maybe he was his himself. But I bet you he had inner critics of some sort. And it didn't hold him back too much, did it? But I think it's really thinking about, if your inner champion is in your head all the time, and they really believe that you are the greatest, and they know that you are the greatest before you do, then really enjoy that support and that strength that you have within yourself. Okay, so that's the end of the slides. If anybody would like to ask me some questions or kind of figure out their inner critics, we can do that. Okay,
Great.
Suzy.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Tracy. That was fantastic, and thank you so much, everybody, for all your contributions and comments and questions. As Tracy says, there is still time to ask some questions or have a conversation. So, and just to remind everyone, a few people have put comments in about will they get the slides and everything because they've had to leave, and it was really great. So you will all receive this by email as you're experiencing it now, if you see what I mean, in the next 24 hours. Okay, right. Are your inner critics related to events that you have experienced in your earlier life?
Yes, they can be. Like somebody I know, she was in a series of bad relationships. Not bad relationships, but she desperately wants a family, big family, big family. And the last two boyfriends that she's with have not wanted a family, and so she's now with somebody who it's going really well, but she is absolutely terrified of bringing up the fact that she wants a family. And it's because she's had that track history of being really sort of rejected on that front, and she's worried about saying anything in case that person doesn't want it and she ends up losing something. So her inner critic would probably be like, well, just keep quiet, don't say anything because you're going to mess it up. So it definitely, I think those inner critics can come about, and that can go way back, can't it? It can happen, I remember early on, well, not early on, I got some 360 feedback, and I did that whole thing that I was telling you about, that 99% of it was glowing, but there was one person who said, oh, Tracy's very direct and can be very abrupt. And so I immediately forgot all the other stuff that was good and focused on that thing. And it's like, oh, I've got a problem. That's a problem with my personality. And then actually a very wise man who worked in HR said to me, oh, Tracy, honestly, I think people focus on don't spend enough time focusing on the positive and spend too much time focusing on the negative. And actually, I just kind of reframed that. I thought, you know what, in the industry, that in the area that I was in, yeah, maybe direct and being abrupt was not such a great thing in that environment, in a big corporate environment. But actually being direct, and I mean, I don't know whether I'm abrupt or not, but being direct and speaking your voice and so many other things when you're championing people or trying to make change and empowering people, etc., is a very good quality to have. So I have dealt with a lot of my inner critics through this kind of process. I hope that helps.
Yes, great, thank you. Now, someone said, I love this, but slightly concerned about who Donald Trump's inner champion is. Any opinions?
Oh,
there you go.
My word. He is a mystery, isn't he? Because he had the dad. His dad was I wonder whether it was the dad, because the dad was the one that made all the money, and then he kind of got that. He inherited $1 million, didn't he, from his dad? There's something that was going on there, but oh my word, who would that be? Somebody who is uber confident
and doesn't listen.
But I suspect that comes with great, I don't know, being in a uber patriarchal, I don't know, because his mum was supposed to be really feisty. I don't know. I really, does anybody else have any ideas of who his inner, maybe he doesn't need, you know, Donald Trump is his inner champion because he just is convinced that he's right, he knows everything. I think Donald Trump would be the uber. He wouldn't be able to find, he wouldn't be able to credit anybody else, would he? He would
No,
have
you're
to
right. Someone else has come to the same conclusion. Donald Trump's inner champion is surely Donald Trump. Can't be saying it.
But I think that's a separate, another really good thing is that I mean, we haven't got onto it today because it's slightly a different thing. But I just think, you know, one of the things I've been greatly inspired by, in a way, is the kind of leaders that we have at the moment, in that they don't necessarily have to have the skill or anything or the expertise, but they've managed to get themselves to those positions literally by just self-confidence. Yeah. And so it makes me think that most of us are really diligent and hardworking and, dare I say, talented and driven, but we don't have that inner self-confidence. But imagine what we would be like if we just decided to be as confident as Donald Trump or, you know, other leaders. There's a great Liam Gallagher's new album. Well, it's not new, but his album is called "Why Me, Why Not." And I'm not, I mean, I haven't listened to the album, but I was really, really greatly taken by that slogan, why me, why not? And I think it kind of came about when there was the election or the leadership contest, and he kept tweeting, why me, why not? Because most people were sort of saying, well, what about me as leader, or this, that, and the other. But I do think that's such an impactful thing, is that to ask yourselves when you're going for stuff is, why me? Well, why not? You know, if people, there are leaders around the world who, well, not, hopefully not around the world, but there are certain leaders who are in the most important positions in the country who aren't necessarily doing, you know, fantastic jobs, but they've got there through sheer sort of self-confidence. So why you? Why not?
Someone's put Kanye West might be one of his, that's quite a good one for Donald Trump. They have similarities, don't they?
Yeah.
Right, I'm going on to a more serious question now. Do parents have influence on an inner critic beginning? Probably.
I would say so, wouldn't you? Because it's that, and again, it might go back to that, them being well-meaning. But, you know, I'll tell you a funny anecdote, but I mean, you can, my mum is Chinese and my dad is Welsh. So I am a mixture of the, you know, the shape and sizes of those kind of DNA. So my mother has, when she's lovely, you know, she said to me when I was about 14, oh, you've got a really big bottom. And for years, I believed I had a big bottom. And I don't know whether the webcam is still on, but I'm going to show you my bottom now. Okay, so that's my bottom, right? Can you see my bottom? Yeah. But it took me years, and it wasn't like a big kind of hang up or anything, but I just believed I had a big bottom. And I'd often wear, you know, those jumpers over my bottom. And then what I realized later on in life is that because she's Chinese, she has a tiny little bottom. She has a tiny little bottom. So to her, I did have this big sort of Welsh bottom, but only in comparison to hers. So, you know, if I hadn't had that realization, I probably would have gone through life thinking I had a very huge bottom. Not that, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but that I think parents definitely, how you grow up and the fears that they have for you, or the what you're told as a kid, definitely bakes into that, bakes in your inner critic. Yeah.
No, I agree. And you don't have a big bottom. Right. How do we find a balance to be realistic and not get carried away by false champions who might boost our shortcomings, as opposed to make us reflect on our own mistakes and shortcomings to improve and become a better version of ourselves?
Yeah, that sounds like, that already sounds like an inner critic going, hang on a minute, I've seen a flaw in this, you're going to get above yourself. But I in all seriousness, I'd say try to have an open heart and open ears to what those inner critics are saying, because there will probably be some modicum of truth or something that you are worried about. So they're not just always being mean, trying to put you down. So for example, my one with the grey version of me who said don't bother, it's because I'm deeply wanting to ensure that my family and that we have enough money to be able to live, so me leaving a big corporate job on a big salary to go off and do something that I wanted to do to live my purpose, you could think, oh, that's quite selfish. So there was a great pressure on me to make it work. So I think there is. So for me, that is what I realized was actually, making sure the finances worked was really, really important. But I kind of know that now. So I think, I'll set myself targets, and I know that unless I, stop that worry, work towards, that aim, then that inner critic will always be there. So I think it's just about I think it's like, okay, so I've gone for quite extreme champions like Muhammad Ali saying, I'm the greatest, I'm the prettiest, I'm the whatever. But just imagine you're not trying to be exactly like that person. It's just like, what advice would they give you? And if you've got like 3 or 4 of them, there's bound to be, you don't have to listen to a particular one all the time. I don't know. You know what? I feel that in terms of like, when I work with people in coaching and stuff like that, a lot of it is about self-belief and lack of self-confidence and perceived limitations. And I've never, ever had one where I thought, oh my God, I've made them, so horribly over confident that they're completely unrealistic. I really don't think that's going to happen, but if you just think, I saw a great Instagram post this morning that said something like, the next time you're thinking of being bold, just imagine what could go right. So instead of us always thinking, well, I want to take a risk and what happens if this happens, then, if we're bold and take a risk, just imagine all the things that could go right. So I hope that helps. That's not, I think there's probably a long way to go before we are all turned into overbearing Donald Trumps.
Quite a few people have talked about parents as well. Even at 50, I'm still having realizations that not all the stuff my mum told me was true, i.e. picking dandelions does not make you wet the bed, and I'm not rubbish at running. It's funny, isn't it? Yes. Okay, I think we've just got time, I'd say, for one more. Hold on. Oh, sorry, I've just got a few. Bear with. Where was that question? Oh, here we go. I have the conversation with my inner critic and champion, but how do you get the motivation to follow the champion and ignore the critic?
How do you do that? You see, because I've got pretty strong inner champions, and you know what? I would spend, if your inner champion is not just going like this to your inner critic, I would just spend a bit more time being compassionate to your inner critic and listening to what they have to say and understanding, trying to get to the bottom of what that value is, because sometimes it's not obvious, it's that niggle, there's something that might be something that you think you might immediately think it's that, but actually just try and delve a bit deeper until you understand what it is trying to either protect you from, or what the worry is there, what the real reason is there. Because I think, it's a shorthand thing for like bringing your inner champion to kill your, to knock back your inner critic. But I think if you don't, that to me, that goes back to really understanding your inner critic and what it is that's underlying that, and almost, think about, well, what would life have to be like? What would the picture have to be like if that inner critic said, all right, I give up, I'm happy now? So what is there that's unresolved there that needs a bit more delving into?
Thanks, Tracy. Right, here's my last question. If you had one golden nugget from today for us to take home with us, or one piece of advice that we should do, what would it be?
I think it would probably be that Instagram post, which is if you're thinking about being bold, just imagine all the things that could go right, you know. And I think it's also, actually, this is more than nuggets, is that no matter who it is in the world, maybe apart from Donald Trump, we've all got these inner critics. He does have inner critics, I'm sure, deep down somewhere. But we've all got them, so you're not alone. You are not alone. And in one sense, it's a good thing that they're trying to protect you. In another sense, it's just it's sort of trying to get at a value that you hold dear. But I think, and also, I guess my last piece of advice is from that HR person that I knew, which is remember that we spend far too long looking at what's wrong rather than focusing on what's right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy. That's been absolutely fantastic. We've had some really positive, lovely comments. So that's very nice. Just to say, yes, so as I keep banging on about it, sorry, you will receive this tomorrow via email, so don't worry if you've missed anything. In a second, a brief evaluation form will pop up. It's really helpful to us if you wouldn't mind just filling it in with any feedback or comments that you might have. And if you're interested, the next This Can Happen event, Zoe Sinclair will be interviewing Dame Kelly Holmes and Johnny Benjamin, the sort of mental health campaigner, next Monday the 18th at 11 a.m. Okay, so that is nothing left for me to do other than to thank Tracy again and all of you for contributing so well. I'm now going to end the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.